Hello, hello, good evening. Welcome back to Naked Morning Podcast. My name is Dr. Carey, for those who are not familiar, and I am hoping you are all safe and doing well. So, today is our second podcast session for this year. We are working on getting back into a groove of things. You know how this goes when you stop for a while. Getting back into a groove can be a little challenging, but we're working on it. I want to send birthday greetings to Dr. K-Tap. Today's her birthday, so I'm doing tonight's session solo dolo so she can relax and enjoy her birthday. So big ups to birthday girl, Dr. K-Tap. So this evening, as advertised, is going to be kind of a conversation really about, or discussion, depending on kind of participation and engagement, about relationship, well-being in relationships, right? Because that's the topic of kind of the series that we've started off this year with. And tonight, I wanted to look at kind of the sticky conversations, the conversations that we often do not have when we buck up or meet somebody who we think we want to have some level of relationship with, right? And when we say relationships in this space, we're pretty broad as it pertains to whether it be dating relationships, marriages, parent-child, so workspace relationships in general. So we were talking about kind of the well-being of relationships in general. But tonight, it's kind of the sticky conversations as it pertains to dating, right? So the conversations that we have or should be having with said individual that we're interested in engaging, and thinking through what it means to be well in those conversations in order to start off our relationships in a healthy, responsible manner, right? And again, for those who are new to our space, excuse me, Naked Morning Podcast is pretty much a space built for dialogue and a container for folks who are of the Caribbean diaspora and pretty much living abroad. Myself, I live in Florida, and Dr. K-Tap also lives in Florida, and we've been away from our home of Jamaica for a number of years. And so we are engaging individuals who are still in their native countries in the Caribbean, as well as individuals who are living abroad. So it's a space for Caribbean identities, and really just having honest conversation about the things that we go through as Caribbean people in the various spaces that we occupy. So relationships is a big thing that we often talk about. And so that's why we decided that for kicking off our series this part of the year, we will talk about different aspects of relationships. And so, yeah, I wanted to raise this kind of conversation around some of the things that we're not asking, some of those sticky conversations, some of those questions that we don't really want to venture into for fear of what the response might be, probably, as well as for fear of not necessarily of having to hold ourselves accountable. I'll put it that way. So accountability in relationships these days also seems to be lacking, and accountability across the board is what I mean, not just in intimate relationships, but just across the board. So, with that in mind, some of the things that I had noted when it comes to kind of us as Caribbean folks and the ways in which we engage each other, date each other, court each other, however we may put it. Um, there are a few things that I often think that we're not necessarily asking, and I haven't necessarily dated a whole bunch of people, so I don't know. Maybe people are asking these questions and are getting along just fine. But in some of the conversations I've been having in different spaces, it seems like we are not really asking some of the serious questions around accountability. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight in terms of these sticky conversations. So, how many of us are actually having the conversation around um, accountability, asking about what our partner was like in their previous relationship? Do we think through some of the characteristics that we actually, portrayed in our own previous relationships? So thinking on both sides, you can't just ask a question and think that it doesn't pertain to you, right? Like there is reciprocity in this. So asking certain questions to gain knowledge about your partner is just as important as you asking yourself that same question and answering, so for your partner's edification as well. So, asking about characteristics, right? What were you like when you dated your previous partner, or what were you like in previous relationships? Are we thinking through what those things are? And very often we speak to what we were like in the good points, right? We talk about the fact that, yeah, I did all this for her or I did all this for him, and they just didn't appreciate me or didn't value me or never listened to me, kind of thing. But do we often share also from the standpoint of the ex? Like, yeah, you're saying that they didn't appreciate you or didn't value you. Can you go into a reason as to why? Why do you think that was? Because I'm sure there were many debates as to why. And you probably just don't want to divulge that information. But this is all part of the accountability component where these hard, sticky conversations have to be had, and you taking yourself into account and holding yourself responsible for actions done or not done in your previous relationships, are necessary to share with your current partner or the person that you're currently thinking of pursuing, right? Um, so when we're sharing these things and you recognize, when you're talking about this is how I was in my last relationship, etc. When you're sharing these things and you realize the discomfort to really go into the full extent of the conversation about why that last relationship didn't break up, particularly if you know that a significant chunk of it was due to your, you know, inaction in some regard, or disrespect in another regard, however you want to think through it, it can be difficult. And if it's difficult for you to hold yourself to account, then maybe moving into another relationship might not be the smartest thing to do right away, right? Giving yourself space and breath between relationships is a very beneficial thing. And personally, it is something that is very helpful. And as a psychologist, it's also something that I recommend to folks, highly recommend to folks, to take pause between relationships. Because a lot of times we're moving, a lot of people just move from one relationship to the next. They just keep, moving, jumping through, and never really taking time to sit with themselves and process what roles they played in their previous relationship and the baggage that they're then potentially carrying forward. Sometimes you have to sit with yourself, deal with the discomfort, unload the baggage, right? Unpack all of that baggage before you can then say to yourself, okay, I'm good with me, right? I am comfortable with me. I know what I am capable of doing and what I can offer to the next relationship. And what you are capable of doing and offering to the next relationship that will be healthy and conducive to a good relationship, right? On that note, on that within that train of thought, one of the things that pops up too is mental health, right? Taking stock of your mental and emotional well-being, right? Since we're talking about core well-being pieces. And we come from a region in the Caribbean, Latin America and the Caribbean, but predominantly focusing on the Caribbean, given where I was born and raised and what I'm aware of. Mental health is still so stigmatized, right? When it comes to people acknowledging having serious emotional distress, acknowledging the desire to seek services, acknowledging the retention of said services. So if your mental and emotional component isn't solid, then moving into a new relationship or recycling an old relationship, excuse me, will not make it any better, right? Having time and space to really sit with some of your discomforts emotionally is essential. And given the fact that or it's like 5 to 7% of individuals within the Caribbean region are reporting mental stress and strain or mental disorders, right? That's a significant number. Upwards of 5% of our Caribbean population are reporting mental disorder signs and symptoms. And I will make the distinction that mental disorder, between mental disorder and mental illness, I'm not saying that 5% of our Caribbean population are mentally ill. Mental illness is a specific diagnosis that has happened over a period of time, right? Once a person has been observed for a period of time, then a psychologist or a psychiatrist can go ahead and diagnose. I'm talking about before that. I'm talking about the anxieties that people have, severe stress that people have. Those things can be that can cause disordered thinking, right? When we're stressed out from work and having to still push through and function kind of thing, those things lend to mental disorder. So that's why I say mental disorder / strain, mental strain, because it's everybody experiences that, right? There's along a spectrum of things. When you're experiencing certain signs and symptoms within a particular period of time, say over 3 to 6 months, then a diagnosis is actually possible to be rendered. So I'm, thinking through that side. So I just want to plug that there is a difference between mental disorder when I say that and mental illness. But it is bringing up that part of the conversation around a person's well-being coming into a relationship is not had. We don't talk to each other about, okay, what was your past relationship like? Sometimes we do, but we don't talk about the mental strain factor of what that may have felt like for you or looked like for you, and what you have done to then adjust, right? In terms of coping, what have you had to change in order to cope better, so that you can move forward in the new relationship in a healthier manner. So, given the fact that, a little over 5% of individuals in our Caribbean region are reporting significant factors of mental disorder, it's important to ask these questions when we're dating or we're seeking to date each other. Like, how are you emotionally? How do you cope? What are some of the strategies that you use to cope? And if you can't get a response, if the person is like, that question is just over their head, then you may want to reconsider engaging this individual. Because if someone cannot speak about how they're managing their emotional state, then that's somewhat of a flag. I think that's a bit of a concern. If folks say, yeah, I deal with my mental health just fine, I cope just fine, and they're drinking a lot of alcohol, they're smoking a lot of tobacco, like cigarettes, and doing all the things that are unhealthy in the long run, um, engaging in frequent unprotected sexual activities is a big thing, right? Because we know in the Caribbean that our sexual identity and our sexual proclivities, according to some folks, are a big deal. They're a big part of who we are as a set of people, a population of people. And it's unfortunate that we don't necessarily always think about um, supporting each other in having safer sexual practices. But hey, this is who we are, and this is where we are. So, asking about how someone was in their previous relationship, asking about some of the traumas that they may have gone through in previous relationship, whether it was a previous intimate relationship or any other past traumas, is important to know, because you need to find out if you're going to be able to handle that uh, in a setting with this individual. You don't know what the traumas possibly are and how they have either hidden them or overlooked them, kind of ignoring, because many of us ignore a lot of these traumas and the impacts, and that can lead to very unhealthy relationships. So think about the mental health aspect and asking about that. Second thing that came to my mind, given the rates of pregnancy in our region, as well as the rates of sexually transmitted infections in our region, I definitely want to flag having the conversation, the sticky, uncomfortable conversation about sexual habits, right? We all know, for the most part, we all know how we talk about in the Caribbean that, um, you know, sex is important in relationships. And so men need to know what they're doing in the bedroom, and women should certainly be a certain way as well when it comes to sex and being in the bedroom and that kind of thing. But do we often ask about your sexual health? Like, how do you practice sexual health and safety? Are you someone who just goes in and, you're just winging it, whatever, still doing pull out method, no condoms involved, no conversation around that at all? We're just having sex because it's what we're going to do. Um, is that is that kind of the way that we're still engaging? And if that is where we're engaging, why are we not comfortable having the conversation? Because I think winging it sexually, right? Just kind of saying she looked good or he looks good kind of deal. They could never have a sexually transmitted infection, or there's something for me to be concerned about and not concerned about pregnancy, because still, in some cases, if I get pregnant, that means I can hold the man, I can keep the man, right? People still think that in this day and age. And we put ourselves at so much risk, all because we don't want to come across as, too concerned or overly questioning. But if we're talking about having healthy and well relationships, then there are a few things that you should be asking about, right? And clearly, if sex is really important to us as just human beings, then why are we not having the conversation around healthy sex practices? You know, it can be all fun and games until somebody tests positive for something, right? And on average, some of the information that I also saw recently, on average, several of our countries in the region, um, roughly 1% of the population of those countries have individuals who are living with HIV. So that's a significant number. You may sound small, right, in a percentage land, but 1% of a population having any illness, disease, disorder, issue, right, is significant. So I know for Jamaica, it is something, I think 2020 data was saying something around 1.4% of the Jamaican population is living with HIV. Um, Haiti was 1.9%, so almost 2% of the Haitian population said to be living with HIV. So these things are important for us to keep in mind. Now, mind you, yes, people living with HIV much longer than they used to. Lots of care and treatment. It's a space I used to work in, and there have been tremendous advances in the space. However, why risk it? One person living with HIV and thriving does not mean that if you become HIV positive, that you would necessarily be thriving. The virus still treats people differently, right? It is not a one size fits all type of situation. So being mindful of that. So you talk about you talk about STIs, and so many campaigns are going on in our countries around condom education, birth control, things of that nature, which is great. But if the rates are still increasing, then people are still not paying attention and they're still not having these conversations, right? So think about that. So think about asking about mental health. And with the mental health piece, ask about family members as well, right? Ask about family members' mental and emotional status and history, because that can also clue you in as to how the person that you are about to engage or the person you are engaging with um, may have some traits that need to be, better coped with, simply put. So those are important to keep in mind. And then, of course, sexual behaviors. You know, it, are you a person that uses condoms? Are you a person that uses just birth control? Are you not using anything at all and you just fly by night out here having fun? I don't know, right? Everybody has a choice. I'm just simply saying, be more informed in your choice. Make sure that you have the sticky conversations and find out where somebody stands when it comes to how they even take care of their own sexual health. I mentioned high pregnancy rates as well in our region. And the Caribbean, actually, I had to make a note of it. The Caribbean actually has the second highest birth rate in the world, apparently, particularly for girls ages 15 to 19. And we are only second to the region of sub-Saharan Africa, right? So what is going on there? And then what does that mean if we have such a high birth rate? What does that mean for the ways in which we are able to resource ourselves in order to take care of those children, right? Um, Ask that question. If we were to get pregnant, how would you support your family, right? A lot of us have this whole baby mama, baby father mentality. In that, I'm not saying the whole of us running around here just comfortable being a baby mother or baby father. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's more the mentality of, if it happened, and then we will deal. But a lot of us are taking that stance and then getting into a situation that we're so stressed out in, we're so uncomfortable in. We regret certain things and resent people because we never asked certain questions to begin with. We didn't take certain precautions to begin with. And even sometimes we get into situations and we think, okay, this person is good, right? I feel safe with this person. We can go ahead and move along these lines and have a family kind of thing. But then something comes up along the line because we did not ask certain questions up front. And then all of a sudden, child is 2 years old and you vex and breaking up happened, right? This is why I wanted to just kind of come on real quick and talk about these sticky conversations, because the sticky conversations can save you in the long run. I was part of a conversation the other day too, where some of us as women, it will never be said like out loud, right? But some of us as women, oftentimes, if we could go back and make a different decision about our the father of our child, we probably wouldn't even have the child. And it's a painful thing to think about, but it's a reality, right? That many women if given the chance to go back and tilt some things, wouldn't land up pregnant for the man that they were landing up pregnant for. Likewise, if many men could go back and choose a little differently, they too would choose not to, they'd probably choose not to have a child with the woman that they've landed having a child with. And this is why I'm saying it is important to come to some level of consensus at the beginning of, oh, she looked good, oh, he looked good, I want there with them type of thing, to ask the questions. If we land up pregnant and have a child, will you be sticking with me to take care of said child? Right? Will you be comfortable with me being mother to your child? Would you be comfortable being father to this child? These are some of the things we're not asking each other. And then we bring children into the situation and it becomes a whole cascade of drama, right? And the children suffer for the faults of the parents. And we see this way too often across the board. So much so that 12% of the households in the Caribbean region, 12% of households in the Caribbean region are single parent homes. And I think that that is quite alarming. And it's also so commonplace for us as Caribbean people that we're not alarmed by it, right? It's not something that we say, oh goodness, this needs to change. No, we're not in that kind of energy space. It's kind of more like, yeah, quite a few homes, quite a few children are just being raised by their mothers. And that's just, we just take it and say that's what it is, right? And I will not discredit that quite a few of these single parent homes are actually fathers raising children. There are definitely a number of fathers in our region raising their children by themselves. But a lot of the single parent homes, based on conversations I've had, based on articles read, and just kind of observation when I go home, you're seeing many of these single parent homes happen because we took a chance, right? You saw somebody, you liked them, and you took a chance and you thought having the baby for them was going to keep them. Or from the man's perspective, he thought probably, okay, she nice, whatever. I could probably deal with this, but when the baby comes, she changed, and it was a whole problem. And then man gone, right? We don't want to deal with that. Or this still happens too. Woman claims that she's on birth control, and man says, okay, good, so I don't need to use condoms. And lo and behold, she's not on any birth control. We're taking a chance, baby come. So we're not that accountability thing, going back to what I was saying before, the accountability piece. It's a little hard because the sex feels so good. You don't want to think about having to hold yourself accountable and all of this jazz. You'll just deal with things as they come. And sometimes the baby comes and then you land up with some STI as well. So it's a double whammy. So just by having a few conversations, we could probably avoid quite a bit of that. So 12% of the homes in the Caribbean are single parent homes, right? I went as far as going and looking at the status of things in Jamaica, because that's where I'm from. And almost 50% of households in Jamaica are single parent households. The exact number that was quoted for the 2020 data was 47%. 47% of households in Jamaica are single parent households. Now, some of these households, are, not necessarily consciously being made single parent households. It could be a case of we started off coupling and then some decision was made, some behaviors came up, and somebody lands in jail. Some decisions were made, behaviors happened, somebody passed away, accident, right? So there are a few reasons as to why we do have single parent households. However, there are some of these situations that can be avoided just by having the uncomfortable conversation around who, what, where, when, how would you behave if a pregnancy happens, right? What kind of resourcing will we be able to call on if something like that were to happen? So think through that particular thing. If you land up pregnant today with the person that you are seeing, are you ready, fitted, booted, and suited to stick to it? Right? And a lot of people are of the mind that, yeah, you don't need to get married to the person who you're having a baby with or having or children with. And that is certainly one mindset. And that works for quite a few people because they do have a strong co-parenting plan and bond. But again, sorry, that co-parenting plan and bond is based on conversations, having the uncomfortable conversations of how you're going to go forward raising a family in a co-parent model if you're not marrying um, each other in that case. So that's another thing, right? So we're thinking through asking around mental health status, how we deal and cope with things emotionally, asking about sexual health issues. Like, and I know for some people, for sexual health issues, they go into the space of thinking like body count, right? It's because there's this whole thing around doing your sexual due diligence and having multiple partners in your 20s and 30s because you're doing your sexual due diligence to know what it is that you prefer and want sexually. Great. You can do the sexual due diligence in a safe manner, right? So asking around sexual habits and behaviors is also having that kind of conversation. Like, how have you behaved sexually? Are you the unprotected sex type of person and you're just winging it and that's just your flex? Or are you using certain protection methods, etc., etc.? Having the conversation is a real thing. If you are serious about having healthy relationships with people. And then second, once, from that, or third, I should say, from that sexual health type of thing is a conversation around having children, whether or not persons want to have children. Do they already have children? Because we know in the Caribbean, there are lots of cases where we have one man with multiple families. He has 3, 4 families kind of thing. It is a popular enough thing in the region. For us to be concerned and for us to have the conversation about whether or not the person that you're engaged with um, has multiple children and wives or ex-girlfriends or multiple children and ex-boyfriends with said boyfriends. It goes both ways, right? So having the conversations around that, I believe, are absolutely quite important and can save a lot of stress and strain. And so I wanted to come on and have the sticky kind of conversation piece tonight with the well being factor in our relationships, because I don't think many of us are having those conversations, the sexual behavior kind of conversation, the mental health and emotional wellness, like how do people navigate those things? The pregnancy talk, like what happens if we do become pregnant? Because people think it's all fun and games until you're pregnant and the father for the child is nowhere to be found, or you're pregnant and neither one of you has resources to lean in on in order to have a safe pregnancy and to raise a family well. So thinking through those pieces, I think, are critical. I also know that another sort of fourth point would probably be this conversation, the uncomfortable conversation, which nowadays doesn't seem so uncomfortable because I hear many people, particularly women, are leading with the man's bank account and asking, how much money do you make, type of thing. And um, a lot, what I've heard in other spaces and kind of observed in some spaces too, if I really think about this seriously, a lot of us as women, and have said this too in some spaces, have been raised with the consciousness of, well, you're supposed to use your looks, and you're supposed to use, not just your face, but like your body, in order to get what you want from a man. Okay. And we see, as young girls growing up, you see how some women in your community, maybe even in your family, how they move when they want something done by a man. And so you learn the craft of being a woman. um, there are instances where I believe it's taken a bit too far, and it becomes abusive. I really think. I know many people are going to be like, "What are you talking about?" I really think that there are some cases where women manipulate their position when it comes to getting things from men, right? And then by and large, a lot of men are expecting that, and so they play the game. So it's not a one-sided thing, and I'm not blaming one or the other gender. I'm simply stating based on observation um, of things, what I've seen, and how I know socially in the Caribbean, we craft our relationships based on certain things. So money is a big, big deal. And if he doesn't drive a certain type of car, if he doesn't have a certain type of job, if he can't take you to a certain type of restaurant on the first date, then nothing happening, right? And quite a few people are still saying that this is the norm in many spaces. And this may be a global norm. This may not at all just be relegated to us as Caribbean people. I think this is probably a global norm where it is leading with the man's wallet, and men reciprocate by doing that, by showing off the car, by showing off where they can take somebody for dinner and this kind of thing, because then they're expecting sex in return. They're expecting some level of admiration in return, right? And it is such an imbalanced process for us to continue going through in this way. I doubt it will change anytime soon, but it is a part of the conversation, the uncomfortable conversation to have. And I think men need to start changing the standards, right? Where they can say and push back and simply state certain things like, my wallet isn't up for discussion. I really, I really think that if a man said that on the first date, like, my wallet is not up for conversation, moving on. It just know that I can handle what my responsibilities are and moving on. It might completely change the tenor of the relationship to be had. And not saying that anybody needs to get defensive or rude around it. Money is important, right? People have to pay them bills. We have to thrive. We have to do things. And yes, there is some aspect of necessary information gathering if you are wanting to be in a relationship with somebody for the long haul, and asking about the level of security that money can provide is important to understand how the relationship will grow and be held together. Because again, if the two are going to build a life together, bills have to pay, school fee have to pay if children are involved, right? Mortgages have to pay if you want multiple homes, all of these things. But I find that many of the relationships, many conversations that are freely had, first starts with the money side of things, and everything else is like, we'll get there when we need to. And I actually think it needs to be early conversation around the health components, a person's emotional health and mental health. Um, of course, their physical health, like just the way the person looks, you can tell about how they're disciplined or not in their physical health. So of course that is critical, right? And then sexual health, how they actually go about engaging in sexual encounters. If it's somebody who just love to just, we just winging it, and we just pull out method is still a thing, and if baby come kind of, yeah, stress and strain. So yeah, so having those conversations around the sex, the pregnancy, the mental, physical health components are important to have. Certainly very important to have. And they're harder to have because a lot of people take offense to being asked about how they cope with stress sometimes, or if there is a history of certain mental illness in families and things of that nature. But those are important conversations to have early, especially if you are thinking about marrying someone or being with somebody long term. So you have to know um, what what is going on and what you're about to embark on. And if there are certain things that the person responds with that you are not comfortable receiving, if you hear that they may have a mental illness in the family and you know you cannot cope with that, with what the potential reality of that may be, then either you step back, right, from the relationship, or you engage and say, all right, I understand that. How can we support each other in me coping with that from your reality and supporting you if something were to happen or show up? So again, important to flag a few things and be conscientious about what you can tackle and what you can't tackle. I think a lot of us say, well, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And when we get to the bridge is when you start panicking and want to jump off. And it's like, can't bother with this person, I can't bother with this person. When if you had the upfront conversations, then you would have saved yourself a whole lot of stress and strain and heartache, right? So just keep in mind a few of those pieces. I really just think that it's important for us to be well in all the relationships that we have, but particularly our intimate relationships, since we spend so much time in those spaces with each other, to know what's going on from the get-go so that you can be better prepared in having a healthy relationship for the long haul, or knowing that you are not ready to fully cope with some of the things that may come along in that relationship, and that you personally need to take more time to support yourself in developing some better coping skills or strategies. So that is my quick share for Sticky Conversations. I'm glad this I'd recorded this. So if anybody has any comments and stuff, please leave comments in the chat. I look forward to seeing them. And we hope to see you next week. So thanks so much, everyone. Bye.